Hey, if you've ever found yourself stuck between who you were and who you're capable of becoming, this conversation is for you.
Driven by purpose, fueled by passion, my words got power, my thoughts have action, motivation, stay gracious, that's greatness, be audacious, motivation, be audacious, innovation, be audacious, inspiration, be bold, motivation, be audacious.
But the pit is not the final destination. And so if you're in it, you have to kind of say, how long am I going to sit in this? And then when am I going to start to get out? I've noticed the most resilient people are usually the most afraid to take the step. And it's really interesting is they just go, oh, I don't know. I'm safe now. I'm comfortable. I'm not sure. And so sometimes what we have to go back just to loop this back into the conversation is we got to see that as our superpower, and we got to quit denying ourselves that. And so if you want to grow, what it means is that sometimes you're going to look back and you're going to cringe or worse about things that you've done. And here's what I'll tell you is that you should have those moments because those moments mean you've grown. People aren't embarrassed of what they haven't grown through.
What if the thing you've been trying hardest to avoid is actually the thing that could help you grow the most? This podcast is all about helping you unlock your inner greatness and live your best audacious life. And today's guest is Jason VanRuler. Jason is a therapist, speaker, and author whose work focuses on trauma, healing relationships, leadership, and self-awareness. His book, Get Past Your Past, explores how our experiences shape us and how we can stop letting them quietly run the show in the background. And honestly, something I kept thinking about while we were talking was how naturally Jason makes difficult conversations feel human. You know, we talked about trauma and healing and self-awareness, and somehow still ended up joking about Spider-Man bites and motion sensor lights, like two guys hanging out over a coffee. And weirdly enough, I think that matters because healing conversations don't always have to feel heavy to have meaning or value. Folks, this one has a lot of great stuff in it. So without any further ado, let's turn to our chat with Jason VanRuler. Enjoy. Hey, Jason, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. I appreciate you for taking the time to be here, my friend.
Oh, I've been looking forward to it. Thanks so much for having me.
Listen, I also have been looking forward to it as well, to engage in conversation. I mean, Jason, for me, the really cool thing is this. You and we're going to engage in conversation or dialogue. You know, listeners have an opportunity to eavesdrop. I like to call it eavesdrop on what we're going to share today, and potentially they can take what we say or use it in some fashion that can help improve their lives in some great way, which is so cool. Or leaving some insights, a nugget of whatever to help individuals on their path. Very, very cool process to be a part of, and I feel blessed to. And so, yeah, thanks for being here and let me do this. Here on this podcast, we talk lots about encouraging individuals to live their best audacious life, right? And that's going to look very different for everyone because, you know, we're all on a different path. And it's the analogy of the pathway is what I like to stick to, because it's very clear we're all on our own path. On that path, it's got our own obstacles, our challenges, our pitfalls, what have you. But there's also rewards, and those rewards usually come after the other side of those adversities. And so that's kind of, you know, where we're at here. Maybe as a starting point, if you could introduce yourself to our audience, talk about the work that you do. I know we're going to definitely talk about your book as well. Get Past Your Past, which I think is a cool title. And what's got you to the point that you're at now?
Yeah, well, my name is Jason VanRuler. I am a therapist, father, husband, and so I've been doing this work for well over a decade now, and have done a lot of work with trauma, worked in the legal system for a while, have worked a lot with couples, and now today I do a lot with leaders, and especially leaders in relationships. So my focus has been, how do I help leaders operate in relationship better, whether they're personal or professional? Because I think at the end of the day, our legacy is really about the quality or our ability to do relationships well. And so the first book that I wrote is called Get Past Your Past. And that is about what do we do when our past is maybe not how we wanted it to be, or what do we do when maybe it was a little bit messy? And then the new book that I've got coming out is called Discovering Your Communication Type, and it's like a 5 love languages for communication.
Okay.
So it's just a really quick way to kind of figure out, why do I communicate the way I do, and how do I communicate better in relationship?
Hmm. I think both. I can certainly see the value in both. Certainly, the get past your past, I think, is a really good picture for anyone, not just leaders, for anyone. It's funny because as you said, well, how do you get past it? You just get past it. Like that's what it is, right? And then I was and I hate that I'm oversimplifying, and I'm not trying to, because I'm not minimizing what people have gone through or experienced. Those experiences of their own. But the fact of the matter is that is the answer. And so we really got to talk about, well, then what it is that's blocking people or preventing people or stopping people from just getting past it. And again, I'm just making it sound super simple, but it's not for some. What have you kind of seen? Some of the things that you've seen in your experiences that have made that getting past so difficult?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times we're not really willing to look at what actually happened and how it impacted us. I think there's this tendency to say it wasn't that bad. Other people have
Mm,
it worse. I'm a Midwestern guy, so we're big on, somebody else had it worse somewhere. So therefore, I shouldn't think too much about it. Or sometimes we just don't want to go back because it's painful. And so I think the first hurdle for a lot of people is just unwillingness to even look at what happened.
to leave in the closet and lock it away.
Yeah, yeah, isn't that best? I mean, that definitely works, right? It never comes back out or seeps out some other place.
Well, and I think the closet sort of analogy works really well because sooner or later that door is gonna have to open up. Sooner or
Right.
later, right? And when it does, all the stuff that you piled in there to keep that door closed is coming out at once, and I think it really provides some good imagery. Um, so if the closet technique doesn't work, then what would you suggest people do with their stuff?
Yeah, well, you have to look at it. So sometimes I met with a little bit of objection because people say, well, you're a therapist. I kind of get your sales pitch, Jason. You're pitching therapy forever. And I say, well, not, forever, just like 20 years. But I'm kidding about that. I'm joking only. What I would just say to you is, like, what's in the closet and what did it teach you? So the biggest thing we kind of have to understand is that, for better or for worse, and it can be both, we were taught about how the world works through our childhood experiences.
Right.
How could we not have been? And so, what we have to really understand is, what were we taught? And then what do we want to do with what we were taught? And so, the thing is, looking in that closet, if you will, some things you'll want to keep. Some things you'll say, this was amazing. This is a great lesson. This is a good story. While other things you might say, hey, I've outgrown this. Or other things you might say, I never liked that anyway. That wasn't a good thing. I don't want that to be in here. But it takes starting and looking at what's in there first.
Right. And therein lies the work, right? Because it's a lot easier to ignore the stuff, the hard work, than deal with it. But I think that approach fails to recognize the fact that the longer it goes, the harder it gets.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and in that way, it's like working out or anything else, right? I mean, you have to start. It's always harder to start than it is to keep it going. But once we do it, and really it's a paradigm shift in how we look at our life. And so when we make that shift and we say, I'm going to give these things the attention they deserve, we start to live differently.
And the other part of this, and I don't think you said it directly, but maybe we alluded to it somewhere in this early conversation, is that dealing with the past does assist with future growth. So if we want to proceed in the future to do the great and audacious things that we have envisioned for ourselves, the past, it's even more critical that we deal with what's behind us.
Yeah, absolutely, because that's the blueprint for how we see the world. And so if we don't like the blueprint, or maybe the blueprint wasn't accurate, or maybe it didn't really honor who we are, if we don't understand that blueprint, we'll just replicate it. And
Right.
and so that's where you'll see people getting chronically stuck, is because they don't understand that some part of them is kind of replicating this pattern they learned that they might not even like or want.
And you know what's really, I'm so glad that you made that point about the blueprint, because it just imagine if we reframed it for a second, right? And we said, and we framed it to not be all these bad things happen to me. It's like these bad things happen to me and I got past it. Now look what I've done, right? Like those are two different experiences. And now you're not afraid to look in the past because the past doesn't represent the bad things any longer. It represents the victory that you gain by overcoming the bad things.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there's a beautiful story there. And I think that story can be one of redemption, one of healing, one of growth. But to go back is just to say, like, what are all the parts of the story and the characters, and how did
Right.
that work? And then
Mm-hmm.
to your point, when we do that, we get to build something that's really amazing and have an audacious life, but we can't really have that if we won't tell the story.
Right. Yeah, no, no, right, for sure. And listen, the folks in the marketing department really appreciate that audacious plug you put in there for me. So thank you. Thank
I
that.
do my best. I do my best.
um, Tell me what inspired you to write Get Past Your Past, and maybe how has that journey maybe shaped your own personal perspective on that process of healing?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the book was a personal one in the sense that I felt like I had my own past to get past, and so in so many ways, I had dealt with that for several years. That was really catalytic in becoming a therapist and helping other people do that. And so, in a lot of ways, the book just felt like a great bookend to a season of my life where I had done the work, I'd helped lots of other people do the work. And what stood out to me is just how do I help people get started doing this in the most accessible way. And
Mhm.
what I know to be true is, therapy is not for everybody. So not everyone's just going to start with a therapist. So I was trying to
Right.
think, what is an on ramp for people who
Yeah.
maybe haven't scheduled an appointment to just start thinking about some of these things differently?
Mm. And how has that process been? And because changing people's thinking is probably it's the biggest job in the world. Like changing someone for some, I mean, not everyone. Again, I don't want to paint everyone with the same brush, but that process of changing thinking that's age old, that's accumulated experiences, all that stuff that because like I believe we're a collection of our experiences, right? And so all of our experiences have brought us to where we are to make us feel and think the way we do. All of a sudden, Jason's gonna come along and tell me to change that? Like come on, right?
Of course, that's easy. You should definitely change just because I said, right? Just because I said so. Yeah, I mean, it's tough. Here's the thing is I go to the same brunch place every weekend and order the same exact thing, the number three. And so if I showed up one day and I ordered the number three and they said, hey, we did away with that, there's a new, better thing you can order, I wouldn't celebrate. I'd be upset, right? So change is hard, but change is often necessary. And so I think where a lot of people come to me is because what they're doing isn't working. Now, if I could get on my soapbox, I'd love to tell people to do the work before you have to, but I
Right.
also am a human and I don't do that either. So I understand the challenge of being proactive versus reactive. But I think a lot of people, they get to a place where they're so stuck, that's when it actually starts to make sense for them to look at things differently.
Hmm. And then what would be the first step then? So let's dig down. When we say look at them, what does that actually entail?
Yeah, I think what I try to start with when I'm working with somebody is just where am I stuck? And people will tell you, and it's usually kind of a surface level answer, right? I'm stuck with self-sabotage. Okay, well, that's great. That's a pretty popular thing to say. Let's talk a little bit about when did that start? Did that just start yesterday? Well, no, that probably started. And so we kind of, what we're trying to do together is to find out the origin story. And that's where a lot of people look the wrong direction is they look ahead instead of behind to kind of
Right.
figure things out. And
Mhm.
so where did this originate and what purpose did it serve then? Because what I know about behavior and what's true is that behavior always serves a purpose, even if it's not the one we want.
Right.
So at some point, self-sabotage made a lot of sense. When was that?
I think for me, what I've always been fascinated by is when the ability to look in the past and all of a sudden remember, oh yeah, this one thing that happened when I was in grade three has stayed with me my entire life, and now I'm a 50-year-old man and I'm acting a certain way. But you can like to be able to pin like that. That to me is really incredible, and sometimes it suggests. And maybe I get your thoughts here, but I think it might suggest that we knew what the problem was all along. And I know in some instances that is the case, but there's others that they don't know, but they figure it out anyways. But it kind of suggests, well, maybe you did know, you just didn't realize you knew. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think we're the expert on ourselves. I think we just need to get the microphone sometimes and speak up. So if
Gotcha.
I do my job well, all I'm really doing is handing you the mic and saying, say the thing you know to be true. And through asking some questions, I can get you to do that, right? I can kind of get you to say the thing that maybe has been on your heart, but no one's asked. Because I think so many of us go through our whole life just wishing someone would ask about something so we could talk about it. And so
Mhm.
my job is to try to give people an opportunity to maybe say the unspoken thing and decide what
Gotcha.
they want to do with it.
What would you say is the biggest misconception that's out there that people have when it comes to getting over their past?
I think that you really get over it. You know, it's kind of funny. It's you don't want to completely get over it, even if it was bad. I mean, there were certainly painful things that have happened to me in my past that I wouldn't wish to revisit, and yet it's part of my story. And
Hmm.
so, what I'm trying to communicate to people is that your superpower is understanding your origin story. And when we understand our origin story, we know the why behind our behavior, and we know how to show up for people and help them. And so, I think, people go, well, it's painful and all this, and they're not wrong, but we're not trying to live in the painful season. We're trying to take what's good or what it's taught us away from that experience and practice it in a new or different way.
Hmm. I kind of frame it as you talk about origin stories. I kind of, like, okay, so in the moment, that radioactive spider that bit me, it hurt,
Right.
but that was in the past,
Right.
right? And so, am I going to talk about that pain that I feel all the time, or figure out how I can swing around the city and stick on walls because of what happened to me? So it's taking a painful experience, so the bite,
Mhm.
taking a painful experience and doing something bigger with it.
I love the
And
way you said that. Yeah, absolutely.
and the part that um when we talk about doing something bigger with it, for me, the part where it always resonates, it's I don't think that I don't think there's nothing bigger we can do in our lives than have positive impact on other people. Right?
Absolutely. Yep.
The spider bit me, it hurt. I put on a costume, now I'm saving the world. Like, that's a cool story.
It's a cool story. It did hurt, right? So, I mean, we can spend some time talking about how it hurt. We need to dress that wound and make sure it heals and all that stuff. But then we sort of shift our focus to now what? Well, I've got these kind of cool skills that can help a lot of people if I understand where they came from.
Right. So Jason, help me then. Why is it like I know we're talking about it, but it's still difficult for people. That bite, I can't let go of that bite.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it hurt so badly at the time and we didn't understand it and we make up a story about it that becomes central to who we are.
Hmm.
And so that's the challenge is to go back means to open ourselves up to the possibility it might mean something different than we thought.
Yeah, yeah. So that story is a big one in this, right? Because you tell a story, you tell it enough, it becomes the story of your life. And we use story to make sense of the world and understand where or our place in it, and how we view future situations. Yeah, this is what it is. And you tell the story like you know the outcome of the situation before it's even happened because your story told you what it's going to be.
Right. Right. We just
And
adhere to it. We kind of tell the story and make it true. And so if that story is you can't trust people and they hurt you, and we tell that story often, guess what? We have a life filled with people we can't trust that hurt us. And
yeah.
so we have to go back and kind of understand, that bite, if you will, and just say, well, was that actually the story or was it a little different?
Mm. Yeah. I didn't know a Spider-Man reference would have so much legs. Dun, dun, dun.
It's got eight.
Legs.
Actually, it's got eight. You're doing great.
Think of that.
I always think about it as, Tony Stark and sort of that energy thing that he's got in his chest.
There you
It's
go.
could be amazing, impactful, or kill him. One of each,
Ah.
right? So it's sort of like it's
Oh.
an asset or a liability, depending on our understanding.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and just how you choose to frame it. Like, it's, when I started to really recognize the power of framing, Like
Mhm.
it was like a game changer because then it became very clear in my mind that everything's about how we see the world, and and how we see the world is how we choose to see the world, and that's really kind of what it comes down to, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of that is we have a lot more agency than we think. If you think about your life as a book, you get to pick which parts to underline or highlight. That's up to you, right? And so when we start to understand that about ourselves, it gives us a lot of freedom to look at the story, change the story, and do something different.
Got you. So I want to pull on that thread a little bit because I think that's the significant. There's some significance around what you're talking about when you look at the story, and look at our own individual stories. We may uncover some things that we don't like, right? We might see some things that kind of remind us of something. We might surprise ourselves. I'd love to sort of talk about the significance of just having grace as we kind of go through that period of uncovering, figuring out, discovering stuff we didn't like. Yeah, I wonder if you could sort of comment on just the significance of grace and what it can do from even like a liberating standpoint, I would say.
I've only ever loved everything I've done. So I don't know personally how to respond to that. I've just only ever gotten it right. But I can try to, and I'm
Do your
being
best.
very
Do your best.
sarcastic.
Do
Yeah,
your
I'm going to
best,
do my
please.
best
Try
here. Do my best. You know what? I think that's the cost of growth. I tell my clients that's the cost of growth. And so there's a cost to burying your head in the sand. There's a cost to growth, and you just have to pick your cost. And so if you want to grow, what it means is that sometimes you're going to look back and you're going to cringe or worse about things that you've done. And here's what I'll tell you is that you should have those moments because those moments mean you've grown. People aren't embarrassed of what they haven't grown through.
Mm,
Right? If you're currently doing something and you think it's the right thing, but it's the wrong thing, you're not embarrassed about it. You're only embarrassed because you've actually grown. So the fact that you would even look back and cringe or be disappointed in yourself or feel bad about something reflects the growth that's already happened. And that, my
mm,
friend, that's the purpose of life is to continue to have those moments. So I think if you're not having those moments, that's a big problem. If you say, hey, you know what, there's
right.
nothing I would have done differently in the last decade. I don't think I've made any mistakes. Well, there's a self-awareness problem we need to work
Right.
through.
Yeah. That's another conversation. But yeah.
Yeah.
I think I oftentimes use an analogy. So life being a series of hills and valleys, right? And it's continuing as we go along, and when we get to the hill, that's where we've experienced joy and satisfaction and happiness and all the wonderful things that life has to offer. But as we know, as we go along, we go and get in those dips, and it goes down, and that's where there's a pain and a heartache and a disappointment and all the things that we don't like, this sucky stuff that hurts. I think once we can understand that life continues, we also know that there are ways, the valley that we're in, that we don't have to stay there. And
Mhm.
I would go so far to say, and I'd be bold to say that if you're there, it's because you chose to stay there. Um, the and what I do try to encourage is how do you get out of that? Well, okay, well, what kind of things do you like staying close? Like we all have things that energize us, it gets us excited, that we love doing, that we'll do for like our podcast, right? So if I'm going through some tough times or whatever, I do some more podcasts and I feel better about myself. So it's so important so the self-awareness thing, so important to be aware of what charges, what gets you excited to get you out of that valley. And now that's just what Audley Stevenson uses as an approach. Are there things that you might be able to suggest, or things that you've seen be really effective when it comes to getting out of that valley?
Yeah, the way that I like to describe it is very similar in the sense that I describe it as a pit. So if you fall in a pit, you have one of two choices. You can build a ladder or you can build a camp. And so that's up to you. Do you want to live there or do you want to get out of there? And so if you want to get out of there, then just step by step we build our way out. And so what that looks like is recruiting some help from people, getting some community, getting some people who can speak to the situation, being active and actually doing something and being committed to getting out. Now the challenge is sometimes we're pretty comfortable with being in the pit.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean we enjoy it there. We enjoy the sad music. We enjoy reflecting. We enjoy overthinking. Like sometimes we have a tendency to say maybe the pit is home. And I get that, but the pit is not the final destination. And so if you're in it, you have to kind of say, how long am I going to sit in this? And then when am
Hmm.
I going to start to get out?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so I'll ask my clients, how long do you want to be in the pit?
Right,
What
right,
what what's the over under? Are we at a week or a month or a year? How much time do you want to spend doing that? And then what will we do next?
right, right, right. And so what I like about the way you framed it is you're not demonized for being in the pit. Like the
Right.
pit is a part of the process and it's a natural part of the process. You might be in a small pit, you might be in a larger
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Maybe
I
the
mean,
pit you're in, you don't need a ladder, right? You can just hop out yourself, right?
a lot of times you can, right? A lot of times you can. Sometimes they're deeper than others. And that's where I would say, grieving and sadness are part of life. They make us appreciate the times we're not in the pit.
Yeah,
And so it's important to understand that we have to have those two as much as maybe we would rather not, because those times make us appreciate the other times. And so one thing I try to help people with, and even personally, is just to understand this is, of course, part of the experience.
right,
It would be super boring if it wasn't. I mean, can
right.
you imagine how we would lack depth if we had only good times all the time?
Well, we wouldn't know what resilience means, right?
You
And
wouldn't
so
need it. Yeah, you wouldn't
yeah,
need
it's
it.
no, yeah, and you talked earlier about being like a muscle, right? So
Mhm.
you build that up because if you've never ever had a challenging moment in your life and you've lived through and things have been great, and then one day this challenge comes up, you're gonna go, what the heck is this? Like, you're not gonna be equipped, you're not gonna be prepared. So I think a lot of what we're going through now is to equip and prepare us for the inevitable challenges coming to our door because I can promise you, and maybe you can tell me if you've seen this. I don't think I have, but I can't recall an instance where someone came to my door and said, listen, at 3 o'clock, things are going downhill for you, so get ready. It just happens when it happens, and I got to respond, right? And so, unless maybe you see it differently, but that's my take.
I mean, it would be great to schedule our bad times. I don't think it works that way, but wouldn't that be awesome? I'm all in.
Sign me up. Spider bites at 3 o'clock.
Spider bites it. I'm in. That sounds like a deal.
Let's jump into the your work with leaders and your emphasis on relationships. Why did you sort of make a point of emphasizing on leaders and their relationships?
Because that's all you have. The thing is that great leaders are remembered by their ability to have relationships. And that's both personal and professional. And so if we don't really know how to navigate relationships, and by the way, it starts with our relationship with ourselves, but if we're not great at that, our leadership potential is capped.
Gotcha. So can we talk about relation with that when you say relationship with ourselves? What does that mean? Is that I'm assuming we talked about grace earlier? That is that part of it, and what else is encompassed in that relationship with ourselves?
Yeah, it's how we talk to ourselves, it's how we
Hmm.
treat ourselves, it's our ability to ask for our needs and wants. A lot of people subscribe to this idea that if you're a leader, it means you don't need or want anything ever. And you're sort of this martyr, right? And you should just do that forever and somehow that will end well. And it doesn't. And it doesn't. And so what we need to understand as leaders is like if you can't treat yourself right, it's going to be really hard to lead well because you're
Mm,
not leading through authenticity. You're leading from a place of emptiness, and people
gotcha.
will see that and feel that from you.
The significance of self awareness. We talked about it earlier, right? Self awareness, how important that is. I would imagine for leaders, it's even more important.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's one of the greatest things that they can understand about themselves and their leadership style is that self-awareness. It's I go back to the Harvard study and it was fascinating. They polled leaders and they said, "How self-aware do you think you are? Do you think you are or not?" And it was something like 95% said, "Yep, I'm totally self-aware. Got all the self-awareness in the world." And it must have been so fun to do this, but they said, "Okay, well, we're going to give you this assessment, and this assessment kind of speaks to actual self-awareness."
Okay.
Well, it was 10 to 15% versus the 95% who thought they were. Okay. And so, by the way, we all do that. That's not just leaders, we all do
Right.
that. But that discrepancy is often the problem in leadership. Because if we don't understand ourselves, we don't understand how people see us and take us, and it's really hard to lead a team and tell them to do something we're not doing. I don't know if you've had this. Yeah, I know you work with people like I work with people, but I've literally had people say to me, I'm really known for being a great listener. And this is after a 40-minute monologue. right? I'm really, Jason, known for letting people speak to me. And you're sitting there and you're like, oh, maybe not today, maybe
You're
other
having an off day.
places, but I,
You're having an off day.
well, yeah, I don't know about today. And hey, by the way, I've done it, right? I mean, I've certainly said, well, this is who I am. And my sweet wife has gone, well, I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think that's how that is. So we all need to practice that, but the better we get at it, the better we lead.
So I know we're laughing at those great leaders who claim to be great listeners. I think what happened, and this is to me where I think self awareness is key, is so the way I see it, who you are is who you are, right?
Mhm.
Um, just because I get into the office and I sit at the desk, I'm suddenly a leader. I'm in leader mode, and I can now listen. It's almost like now listen. So I wouldn't be surprised, even those people that say, "Hey, I'm a good listener." They're talking about, "Oh yeah, when I'm in my leadership role and position." But it's who you are is who you are, and that's kind of, I mean, that's my initial thought, not knowing these individuals. But I wouldn't be surprised if there was a little bit of that going on. Like they're almost trying to break themselves apart, like in this place I'm this way, and in that place I'm that way, when you are the same person.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, and that is a misconception a lot of people have is that we somehow are a good enough actor to convince people that we're two different versions of ourselves. And what's true is number one, if you could do that, that would be awesome, but it'd be a lot of work. And then number two, people follow authenticity. That's actually what they lean into. I mean, if you look at the great leaders through history, there weren't always the most eloquent or polished people, but they were
Right.
people who were authentic and convicted. And so when we have that ability to understand that about ourselves, people will follow, but they don't follow people who are playing a role.
Right. Reminds me, I remember, so Audley is my father's name, and so I grew
Mm,
up as a junior, right? So in my household, and like to this day, my mom only ever calls me junior. She's never called me Audley a day in my life. And childhood friends still call me junior because that's just the name they know me as growing up. But I vividly remember, I must have been my late teens. I was like, yeah, I'm not a junior anymore. Like, yeah,
mm.
I'm a grown man. Don't
I'm
call
a
me.
senior. I've
Yeah,
moved on
exactly.
to
Right,
senior.
right. That's why I was. Yeah, I was junior. And so, I was insistent that hey, call me Audley, which is, yeah, I guess my name, and so and I accept that. But I also remember going, okay, maybe this is an opportunity to sort of change who I am and be Audley, this really straight, serious guy, and that's that kind of in my mind. And I couldn't understand. I couldn't understand why, uh, although I changed my name, that people still saw me and treated me and behaved like I was this guy junior. That I grew up was as a clown, class clown, and laughing and giggling and all that and having fun. They couldn't understand that because I'm like, no, my name has changed, so that means you treat me differently. And it just speaks to what we just talked about. Like, we are who we are. Doesn't matter what you call yourself. Your true, authentic you will always rise to the surface.
Oh, that's actually a really powerful story, my friend. I mean, that moment is sort of saying, well, hey, now I'm different.
Right.
And everyone goes, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, okay, sure. We just know you this way. And here's what's really
Yeah.
funny about that is that people who love us well never fall for the trick.
Mm.
Right. So we go, well, hey, now I'm this person. And they go, yeah, 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 yeah. No, I just love the real you. But if you want to make it weird or awkward or difficult, you can. But they're like, we
Yeah.
just like you,
Yeah.
Junior.
Yeah.
We just
Yeah.
like you.
That's right.
And so what I like about that is like the people who love you best, you never have to sell.
No.
It never
No.
requires that. You just show up. And so to your point, life is easier if you just be who you are, as opposed to trying to advertise something different.
Agreed. I want to go back because I forgot to. I'd love to get your take on it. We were talking our healing conversation earlier. I really would love to get your take on the role that courage plays in healing in the growth process.
Yeah, it's a courage play. You know, it's a courageous act to bet on yourself. And I think it's made even more difficult if maybe no one else has ever bet on you. But what I always tell people is if no one else has ever bet on you, you can be the first. And there's a lot of power in doing that. And so yeah, it is a courageous thing, but I would tell you it's just one step. You take
Mm.
one step, you think about it, you take another, and so it doesn't We don't have to connect it to this huge life change because I see people say that, where they go, well, here I am and I want to end up over here. And Jason, it's, 400 steps. And I say, I only care if you take the first. The rest we'll figure out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a Martin Luther King Jr. quote I refer to all the time, about taking that first step when you can't see the rest of the staircase, but you still take that first step, and that's really what you're signaling to. And that's sort of the audacious move, right? Like let's go. We don't know where it's going, but let's go anyways. Let's try it. And so that's I think that's key there. I'd love to get your take on what does living audaciously mean to you?
Yeah, well, I think it's doing what you're saying, right? It's taking those steps. It's betting on yourself. It's being part of something bigger. And when you say that quote, I love that Martin Luther King one, and I think then Indiana Jones, ripped off the concept when you think about the movies, and he has to take the step, but he can't see the step, and there's great visual, and I think our whole life is like that. What I usually try to tell people that's really interesting about the work I've done with people who have high trauma is I've noticed the most resilient people are usually the most afraid to take the step.
Hmm.
And it's really interesting is they just go, oh, I don't know, I'm safe now, I'm comfortable, I'm not sure. And so sometimes what we have to go back just to loop this back into the conversation is we got to see that as our superpower, and we got to quit denying ourselves that. And so when we get it, I think an audacious life is knowing our superpower and taking those steps.
I love it. I love it. Um, I don't know. I'm with you, Jason. I've had a great time chatting with you, and we had a lot of fun here. Something that we like to do here, and I hope you're up for it. But we like to do a quick little rapid fire. We call it, fearless fast round. You have to give it a shot there. What do you think?
Let's hear it. Yeah, let's
All
hear it. I'm
right.
in.
So first word that is, first that comes to your mind, um, when you think of, vulnerability or resiliency, which one builds more strength?
That's good. Well, I think vulnerability probably. I think that's the precursor. Yeah, but that's kind of a chicken or egg. Yeah.
Okay, okay, okay. A book that's changed your life.
I love the Four Agreements. That's been a really important book in my life. Let's see. So many. I read
Mm,
about a book a week if I can.
okay, okay.
So I love that. Carl Jung's work has really stood out. Irving Yalom, those are kind of therapy people. But some of those would be good. And then I'm a faith guy. So I take a lot of wisdom from my faith in the Bible. And so that's been really impactful too.
Okay, okay. Hardest lesson that you've learned as a therapist.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, I know that one immediately. Helping people change and pleasing them are two different things most days. And so you have to sort of decide if you love somebody enough to tell them the truth or you don't. And I think being good at helping people change is helping them through the hard times because it's true instead of sugarcoating things or maybe telling them it's not what it is or they don't
Mhm.
have to do anything. That lesson was hard for me because I don't want to see people hurt. But
Right.
what I know is just like you said at the beginning, what's on the other side of that hurt is often the thing that people have been waiting their whole life for. And so, real quickly, I had to get used to this idea that sometimes we're going to have conversations that hurt so we can heal.
Got you. I like it. I like it. A quote that you live by.
Scott Peck says mental health is commitment to reality at all costs. And I love that one. I think about that often. I also just think about the verse, there's nothing new under the sun. And that really keeps me peaceful because I just go, hey, there's some version of this. This has already happened. It's already been done. Someone's already thought of it. And so I don't have to feel alone in this.
The most courageous thing you've ever done.
Boy, I've never bungee jumped or anything. So, I mean, I probably don't have any cool stories like that. I think, for me, the most courageous things that I've done are probably ask the question I didn't want to ask, right? To get the help I needed, that I didn't want to say I needed. I think also putting a book out was a big deal for me. Just sort of saying, like, I don't know what the world's going to do with this, and they might love or hate it. But also probably being a dad and being a husband when I'm not always sure how to do it. I
Mm.
just try to keep growing and showing up better.
One thing people misunderstood or misunderstand about therapy.
Yeah, I think that it has to be forever, or I think that it's
Or 20
somehow.
years?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I got to put my kids through college, so 20 years would be great. I think one thing people misunderstand about me is my sense of humor. You can be serious and funny, as you know, because you are too. So I think it's kind of off-putting sometimes that people are like, oh, you can actually joke around. But I think when people look at therapy, what they sometimes don't always understand is that we're not trying to get you to be dependent on us. We're trying to get you to be dependent on you. And if we
Powerful.
do it well, that's what happens.
Powerful, powerful, powerful. Lastly, then, what one word best describes you today?
I would say hopeful. Yeah, I'm a hopeful guy.
Very cool. There we go. That wasn't too hard, right?
No,
Okay.
that was easy. That was easy. Love it.
Jason, for people that want to connect with you or learn more about your work or grab a copy of your books, where can we send them?
Yeah, jasonvr.com is my website. So you can look there. Or if you've heard me today and you think, man, I'd love to hear this guy every single day. Hey, I don't blame you. You can look me up on Instagram at jason.vanruler, and I post daily relationship advice.
Cool, cool. Well, we will make sure to that all the contact details are in the show notes below. Jason, thank you for this. This has been great. I had a lot of ton of fun with you, and appreciate the work you're doing. And thanks for being a guest on the Audacious Living podcast.
Oh, well, thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. I appreciate it.
Cool. Be well, my friend.
Yeah, you too.
First off, shout out to Jason for being such a good sport throughout this whole chat, with my motion lights going off randomly, shutting off every 10 minutes or so, and us somehow turning Spider-Man into a therapy case study. This episode definitely had its moments. And honestly, those moments made the conversation feel even more real. But underneath all of the laughter and the chemistry was something, really, really powerful. The idea that understanding your story changes how you move through life, not ignoring it, not pretending it didn't happen, but understanding it. One thing Jason said that really stayed with me was when he talked about behavior always serving a purpose. I think a lot of us spend years frustrated with ourselves without ever slowing down long enough to ask where certain patterns actually came from. And sometimes the breakthrough isn't discovering something brand new. Sometimes it's finally admitting what you already knew deep down. And that's what makes conversations like this so important, because the moment we stop seeing ourselves as broken, we start seeing ourselves as people still learning, healing, and growing. Everything begins to shift. And this actually perfectly lines up with this week's Audacious insight, because there's a lot of real world example that connects beautifully to the idea of reframing pain into purpose. It's time for an Audacious insight where we take a quick look at something happening in the real world that reflects the power of bold thinking and intentional action. After surviving a traumatic brain injury and spending years rebuilding her confidence and identity, Ann Purdy didn't allow adversity to become the final definition of her life. Instead, she transformed unimaginable loss into purpose, eventually becoming a Paralympic medalist, speaker, author, and an advocate who now inspires millions around the world. What makes her story so powerful isn't just what happened to her, it's the way she chose to frame what happened to her. And sometimes that's the real shift, realizing the pain may become part of your story without being the end of it. And by the way, if you want to connect with Jason, grab one of his books or follow his work, head over to jasonvr.com. And if you really enjoyed this episode, make sure you follow, subscribe, leave a review. It's so much appreciated. And share it with someone who might need this conversation right now, because you never realize, or you never really know, who's quietly trying to climb out of their own pit. And if this conversation reminded you of anything, I hope it reminded you that your story isn't over just because a chapter hurt. Sometimes the very thing that wounded you becomes the thing that teaches you how to help others heal. I want to thank you so much for joining us here, and until next time, keep living life audaciously.
Driven by purpose, fueled by passion. My words got power, my thoughts have action. Motivation, stay gracious. That's greatness. Be audacious.